If you ever find a door standing alone in the middle of the woods, don't go near it. I know that sounds ridiculous. If someone had told me that a year ago, I would have laughed in their face. Now, I don't hike alone anymore. My name is Ryan Carter, and this happened to me in October of 2025 in Oregon's Willamette National Forest. Photography has always been my escape. Every fall, I'd disappear into the mountains for a weekend, looking for places most people never see. I wasn't one of those thrill seekers chasing ghosts or abandoned buildings. I just loved quiet forests, old trails, and taking photos of wildlife. That Saturday morning looked perfect. Cold air, orange leaves, clear skies. I parked my truck near an old trailhead that barely anyone used anymore. There wasn't another vehicle in the parking area. Just mine. I packed my camera, water, GPS, and enough supplies to stay out until sunset. Around noon, I left the marked trail after spotting a herd of elk moving through the trees. I figured I'd follow them for a few minutes, take a couple of photos, and head back. That turned out to be the biggest mistake of my life. The elk disappeared almost immediately. When I tried walking back, the trail was gone. At first I wasn't worried. I'd gotten turned around before. I checked my GPS. The screen froze. I restarted it. Nothing. My phone wasn't any better. No signal. No offline maps. Just an empty screen searching for service. I remember laughing to myself. Relax, Ryan. You'll figure it out. For the next hour, I walked what I thought was west. Instead, I somehow went deeper into the forest. The trees became thicker. The sunlight barely reached the ground. Even stranger, everything became completely silent. No birds, no squirrels, not even wind. The silence was so complete that I could hear my own breathing. That's when I noticed it. About 50 yards ahead, standing between two enormous pine trees, was a door, just a door. No cabin, no wall, no fence, nothing attached to it. It was an old white wooden door with peeling paint and a small square window near the top. Moss covered the bottom, making it look like it had been standing there for decades. I honestly thought someone was filming a prank video. I walked around it. Nothing. There wasn't even a foundation beneath it. It simply stood upright in the dirt as if the forest had grown around it. I laughed. This has to be an art project. I pulled out my camera and took several pictures. I even reached out and knocked on it. 3 times. Knock, knock, knock. Nothing happened. I grabbed the old brass handle. Locked. Okay. That was weird. I turned around and continued walking. About 20 minutes later, I stopped. The trees looked familiar. Too familiar. Then I felt something in my stomach tighten. Standing ahead of me, between 2 different pine trees, was the same door. Exactly the same. Same chipped paint, same brass handle, same tiny window. I stood there for several seconds trying to convince myself I was imagining things. No, I must have walked in a circle. That made sense. At least it did for another 5 minutes. This time, I deliberately picked a completely different direction. I even carved a small mark into one of the trees with my pocket knife so I'd know if I somehow came back. I walked for nearly half an hour. Eventually, I saw the tree I'd marked. Relief washed over me until I looked beside it. The door was standing there, again. I felt every hair on my arm stand up. That wasn't possible. Nobody could have moved it. Nobody was even out there. I backed away without taking my eyes off it. Then something happened. I'll never be able to explain. Knock, knock, knock. The sound came from the other side of the door. I froze. Someone, or something, had just knocked back. I didn't move. Another 3 knocks echoed through the silent forest. Then, a little girl's voice, soft, barely above a whisper. "Please, can you open the door?" Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run. Instead, I asked the dumbest question I've ever asked. "Who's in there?" There was a long silence, then she answered, "I'm scared. I can't find my mom." I slowly reached toward the handle. Before my fingers touched it, a loud male voice exploded from somewhere behind me. "Step away from that door!" I spun around so fast I nearly fell over. A man in a Forest Service uniform stood about 30 feet away. He looked to be in his early 40s. Weathered face, gray-green jacket, old ranger hat. A rifle hung over one shoulder. His name tag read, Jacob Miller. He walked toward me without taking his eyes off the door. "Did you open it?" "No." "Did it speak to you?" The question caught me completely off guard. "Yeah?" His expression immediately changed. He looked genuinely worried. Without another word, he grabbed my arm. "We're leaving." I glanced back toward the door. The little girl's voice came again. This time, she was crying. "Please don't leave me." Jacob didn't even look back. He tightened his grip on my arm. "Whatever you do, don't answer it again." For the next 20 minutes, we hiked through the forest without saying much. I kept expecting to see the road, but the woods only seemed to get darker. The sun was already disappearing behind the trees, and the temperature dropped fast. I finally asked him where his ranger station was. He hesitated for a second. "Not far." A few minutes later, we reached a small clearing. My heart nearly stopped. The same white door stood in the middle of the clearing. Only this time, there was something attached to it. An old wooden ranger cabin. Smoke drifted from a rusted chimney. A lantern burned beside the entrance. I stared at Jacob. When I found that door earlier, there wasn't a cabin. He looked at me for a long moment before quietly saying, "I know." Then he opened the door and said, "Get inside." I wish I had asked more questions. The moment I stepped inside, I noticed something strange. The cabin looked old, much older than any Forest Service cabin I'd ever seen. A cast-iron stove burned quietly in one corner, filling the room with warmth. An old wooden table sat beneath a dusty lantern, and shelves along the wall were packed with faded maps, rusted tools, and glass jars whose labels had long since disappeared. Everything looked as though it had been frozen in time. Jacob quietly shut the door behind us. The sound echoed through the cabin. For some reason, that made me feel safer. "You can relax," he said. "Nothing will come in here." Those were the first calm words he'd spoken since I'd met him. I set my backpack on the floor and finally asked the question that had been bothering me. "What was that thing?" Jacob didn't answer immediately. He poured hot coffee from an old metal pot into 2 chipped mugs before handing one to me. "You got lost today, didn't you?" I nodded. "It always starts that way." "What does?" "The door." I frowned. "I don't understand." He looked into the fire for several seconds before speaking again. "People think they find it. The truth is, it finds them." A chill ran through my body. I tried laughing it off. "So what? Someone hides it as a prank?" Jacob looked at me with an expression so serious that my smile disappeared. "I've watched experienced hunters walk in circles for hours. I've watched GPS units fail. I've watched compasses spin. And every single person eventually finds that door." The room suddenly felt colder. I remembered my frozen GPS. The missing trail, the impossible silence. It all came rushing back. "So, what's behind it?" Jacob immediately looked away. "Don't ask. You know, don't you?" I said, "Don't ask." His voice wasn't angry. It was afraid. Real fear. That scared me more than anything he'd said. A few minutes passed in silence, then knock, knock, knock. 3 slow knocks echoed from outside the cabin. I nearly dropped my coffee. Jacob didn't react. He simply kept staring into the fire. Another 3 knocks, this time louder. I looked toward the front door. Someone's out there. No, there isn't. You don't even want to check? No. His answer came instantly. Why? Because if you open that door tonight, you won't come back. I laughed nervously. What, a bear? Jacob slowly shook his head. I wish. The knocks stopped. For almost a minute, everything was silent again. Then came a voice, a woman's voice, soft, weak. Ryan. Every muscle in my body locked up. I hadn't told Jacob my name until after we'd reached the cabin. Whoever was outside knew exactly who I was. I looked toward Jacob. His expression hadn't changed. He simply closed his eyes. Don't answer. The woman called my name again. This time she sounded terrified. Please, I hurt my leg. I can't walk. I took 1 step toward the door. Jacob stood up so fast his chair crashed onto the floor. I said don't. His voice exploded through the cabin. I'd never heard someone sound so desperate. He grabbed my shoulder. It doesn't matter whose voice you hear. It isn't them. I stared at him. What are you talking about? It listens. It learns. Then it becomes whatever you'll trust. The room fell silent again. For nearly an hour, nothing happened. Eventually, I convinced myself I was imagining everything. Maybe I'd hit my head while hiking. Maybe stress was making me hear things. Jacob handed me an old blanket. You should get some sleep. What about you? I'll stay awake. You don't sleep? Not here. Something about the way he answered made me uncomfortable. He wasn't trying to be mysterious. He sounded exhausted, as if he'd said those same words 1,000 times before. I lay down on an old cot beside the fireplace. Outside, the wind slowly picked up. For a while, everything seemed normal. Then I heard it. A low growl. Not close. Far away. Another one answered, then another. Within seconds, the entire forest seemed alive with wolves. Dozens of them. Their howls surrounded the cabin from every direction. I slowly sat up. Jacob was already standing by the window, watching. He didn't seem surprised. He seemed like he'd been expecting them. One howl suddenly came much closer than the others. It sounded like it was only a few feet outside. The cabin door shook once, then again. Something heavy had just slammed into it. I froze. Another impact, this time even harder. The old wood creaked. I looked toward Jacob. He quietly picked up the old rifle leaning against the wall. Relief washed over me. At least he had a weapon. Then I realized he wasn't loading it. He simply held it, almost like he already knew he wouldn't need to fire. Whatever was outside slammed into the cabin one more time. The lantern hanging above us swung back and forth. Dust fell from the ceiling. Jacob slowly looked at me. His face had gone completely serious. Ryan, no matter what happens next, do not open that door. Then, everything outside suddenly went silent. The silence was somehow worse than the howling. Jacob stared toward the window. His grip tightened around the rifle. Without taking his eyes off the darkness outside, he quietly whispered something that made my blood run cold. It's here. For several seconds, neither of us moved. The cabin was completely silent. Even the wind had stopped. Jacob slowly walked toward the front door and rested one hand on the handle, almost as if he was listening to whatever stood on the other side. I couldn't hear anything, no footsteps, no breathing, nothing. Then, 3 slow knocks. Knock, knock, knock. They came from the other side of the door. Jacob closed his eyes for a moment before quietly saying, "Stay where you are." The knocking stopped. A few seconds later, I heard something moving around the cabin. Heavy footsteps circled the walls. Then they stopped beneath the window beside me. I slowly looked toward the glass. At first, I saw nothing except darkness. Then 2 glowing yellow eyes appeared. They were much higher than a normal wolf's. The creature stared at me without blinking. My heart nearly stopped. It let out a deep growl that seemed to vibrate through the entire cabin. Before I could even react, the window shook violently. The thing had slammed into it. I stumbled backward. Jacob stepped between me and the window. He never raised his rifle. Instead, he simply stared into those glowing eyes. Neither of them moved. The growling continued for several long seconds. Then, something changed. The creature slowly lowered its head, its ears folded back. It took 1 step away from the cabin, then another. A moment later, it turned and disappeared into the darkness. Within seconds, every howl in the forest was gone. Complete silence returned. I looked at Jacob in disbelief. "You didn't even fire your rifle." He didn't answer. He quietly leaned the rifle back against the wall. "You should get some sleep," he said. I wanted answers, but I was too exhausted to argue. I lay back down on the cot, still trying to understand what I had just witnessed. The last thing I remember was watching the fire slowly burn lower, while Jacob remained sitting in the chair near the door, silently staring into the flames. When I opened my eyes again, the fire was gone. The cabin was gone. Jacob was gone. I was lying on the side of a paved forest road. For a few seconds, I honestly thought I was still dreaming. I jumped to my feet. There was no cabin, no white door, no clearing, nothing. Just endless pine trees stretching in every direction. My backpack was lying beside me exactly where I had been sleeping. Before I could make sense of any of it, I heard engines approaching. 2 Forest Service trucks came around the bend and stopped beside me. 3 rangers jumped out and ran toward me. One of them grabbed my shoulders. "Oh my God, you're alive." I stared at him. "What do you mean?" "We've been searching for you all night. Your truck was still at the trailhead. We thought you were dead." Another ranger handed me a bottle of water. "Are you hurt?" I shook my head. "No. A ranger found me." They all looked at each other. "What ranger?" "Jacob Miller." The moment I said his name, every single one of them went silent. One ranger slowly asked, "Can you repeat that name?" "Jacob Miller." "He found me in the woods. He took me to his cabin. He saved my life." Nobody spoke. Finally, the oldest ranger quietly said, "Come with us." They drove me to the district ranger station about 30 minutes away. Without saying much, the older ranger unlocked a storage room filled with old records. He pulled out a dusty metal file cabinet and removed a yellowed folder. Across the front were the words, "Missing, Jacob Miller." My stomach tightened. He placed an old photograph on the desk. I felt the blood drain from my face. It was him, the same weathered face, the same ranger hat, the same uniform. He looked exactly as he had the night before. Not older, not younger. Exactly the same. I looked up at the ranger. "This photo, when was it taken?" He took a slow breath. "October 1994. I couldn't speak. He continued. "Jacob Miller disappeared while searching for a lost backpacker. We searched these woods for nearly 3 weeks. We never found him. No body. No cabin. Nothing." I stared back at the photograph. "That's impossible. I spent the entire night with him." The room fell silent. Then the older ranger opened the folder one last time. Inside were several written statements from rescued hikers spanning nearly 3 decades. He pointed to the first page, then the second, then another. Every statement described the same man, the same name, the same cabin, the same warning: don't open the door. The ranger looked at me and quietly said, "You're the 5th survivor who's told us Jacob Miller saved them." I never hiked in that forest again. A week later, I developed the photographs from my camera. Most of them were exactly what I expected: the trail, the trees, the strange white door. But one photograph made me throw the entire stack onto the floor. It was the picture I had taken of the door before Jacob found me. At first, it looked normal. Then I zoomed in on the small glass window. Standing behind the glass was Jacob. He wasn't inside the cabin. There wasn't even a cabin attached to the door when I took the picture. Yet, somehow, he was already standing behind that window, watching me, waiting. To this day, I still don't know what the door really is, or what happened to Jacob Miller 30 years ago. But if you ever find an old white door standing alone in the middle of the woods, walk away. Because if it has found you, there's a chance Jacob already has too.